Okay, thanks. So as advertised, we do have time for questions. If you choose to ask a question, please use one of the mics in the aisle so that your voice is captured in the session recording. Anyone? I don't see anybody leaping up to go to a microphone. Well, let's see. I'll start with an admittedly.
A brave
soul. Oh, okay. Well, Hans, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Hans Kölsch with the EOS. When you say no DRM, would a soft watermarking be acceptable? That would identify the institution or the individual who downloaded the PDF?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. Did you all hear he's asking about a watermark in the file? I'm not working with that group, but I can take the question back to them. Thank you. So.
Okay, I'll ask a question. Before I was a consultant, I spent my entire career working for publishing companies. So this is pretty much of a publisher's question. One of the Charlotte principles that you mentioned, October, was the notion of unlimited number of concurrent users for a given title. And I started in the industry, obviously, back in the print days, when if the library had one copy of a book, basically that implied one concurrent user. The thought of now one eBook purchase implies infinite users is just a little hard for a former publisher to wrap my mind around. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, we're hoping that it averages out, because by offering that, by adhering to the principles, that libraries would be willing to buy more content. They wouldn't feel like they had to really pick and choose and just get the things that were going to be, the highest demand, and that way the publisher's revenue would be unaffected. You would sell aggregates, you would sell more content, it would get used more, but you would sort of be made whole because the libraries would buy collections. It remains to be seen if that's actually going to work, but one of the things that we're studying, I hope I had a slide in there that showed the Charlotte textbook list, or the titles that are available. They have a database of titles that are available that they promote to the faculty. So faculty assign a lot of content, book content. Some of them become the equivalent of a course adoption, where it's used sort of like a textbook for a class, but that's not the majority. The majority are used like any other resource. It's used like a journals database or anything else. So, in these early days, we're gathering statistics and encouraging our working group members to look at their statistics and see, what are we learning from this? And what we're seeing at Charlotte so far is that something like 60% of the titles in the Project Muse collection have been used in the last year. And they have all of Project Muse. They have all of the back file, they have all of the current stuff, all of the packages. So it's, we're trying to find other people to do that kind of analysis and see how it works. And then the second part of your question, this is scary to publishers, how do we know we're not going to lose our shirt? That's part of the environmental scan. We want to find out, if you're not willing to, what are your terms? Here's what we're asking for, what do you need to ask us for? So I'm not exactly saying to people in the survey, do you need to charge more money? Do you need to make it time limited? But that's what we're trying to tease out. It's like this, we want both sides to get what they need, and we want to make this sustainable. So.
Great.
We use multiple user for open ebooks, and that was a really interesting conversation with the big 5 publishers. It was just kind of like, no, they didn't want to do that, same idea. But we found that if we said, well, let's give you some data on how many people actually are hitting one title at one time. So that's, and then we could go back and renegotiate, you know, if we find that something is happening, or if they want to pull a particular title, or maybe they notice that one title is being used over time, and then they can do some outreach for purchase for print or something like that. So a lot of times it's, I think the perception is a lot, I mean, we're in unknown territory. We really don't know what the effect is going to be. And so it's keeping an open dialogue and saying, well, what are the issues, and can we track data on a particular usage? And then a lot of times it's not nearly as scary, I think, as what the reality ends up being. And so.
Looks like,
Yeah. Well, and, you know, one thing to clarify, Rachel's talking about the big five publishers that are trade publishers. You know, we have a big five on the academic side too, but yours
yeah.
are what? Macmillan?
Macmillan, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Hachette.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if I can get Hachette to read it, you know.
Right, right. And they've been really unpopular because they've allowed one user at a time. So when a title's checked out from a public library, there's a 26-week waiting list for other people waiting for that title. So it's a similar set of issues. And with our unlimited use, we want somebody to be able to assign a title for a class, you know, as part of homework, and maybe 20 students need to see it within a 2-day period. And why shouldn't that be permitted? You know, you don't want to create a roadblock, and once the students are exposed to it in that way, maybe they're going to come back to that title, that author, that publisher for subsequent research because they've been exposed to it.
well, I guess as Gorbachev used to say, trust but verify.
Yes.
Okay, another question.
Hi. So I'm with a social science publisher. We publish books. I guess I wanted to know, with multiple use, what are your expectations on price? And how does that affect your expectations for pricing? And how does it compare to buying a hardcover, for example?
Yeah. We haven't actually gotten to pricing discussions yet. I think they're coming. Some of the people I've talked to individually, you know, not in convening the group, but in our other conversations, some of our working group members have said, if we can see there's a lot of use, however they want to define it, we're willing to buy the equivalent of additional copies. You know, we're willing to say, that's fair, we'll pay more. But you balance that with, okay, we're buying a package and 10% of it gets this really high use, 40% of it gets moderate use, and then there's 40% that gets no use. Well, we don't want to pay more for some things when we've got all this other stuff that isn't being used. So we're trying to sort of work out the dynamics of, wouldn't a publisher rather sell all of their stuff for some kind of average price and recognize that there are going to be these imbalances in use, rather than just selling the things that people absolutely know they need and leaving everything else unsold. So.
I'm a librarian. I don't have a question so much as a response to your question. We have a lot of ebooks, and those collections are expanding. We're a STEM school, an engineering school mostly. We're using the patron-driven or demand-driven acquisition model more and more, so that we don't have to buy packages that will include books that may not be used. And as the collections librarian, I am willing, and I do, pay more for content that's going to be used if it's multiple, if there are simultaneous users allowed. That's
Yeah. Something else that I personally think is sort of promising, but again, we haven't gotten to it yet. Are any of you familiar with the Springer My Copy program? Do you all know about that? Okay. Well, that is a pretty popular program. And what is involved is that Springer sells ebook packages by discipline. So they have something like 16 disciplinary packages. If the library subscribes to the ebook package, users of that package have an option of purchasing a print copy for $30. Now, for Springer, it's a good deal because the list price for that book may be $80 or $120 or $150. And the title that's available in the My Copy program is black and white, it's paperback, it's a print-on-demand thing. But we're seeing that in certain disciplines and in certain uses, students still want their own print textbook. So in that case, the ebook package that the library pays for is getting some support because users can buy their own copies. And something that public libraries seem to be much more comfortable with than academic libraries is most library catalogs, the software that libraries use to search their catalogs and link people through to the ebooks. In public libraries, you can turn on Google Books or Amazon or multiple things, and the public library doesn't see that as a problem. They see that as a service to their users. Gee, you'd like to have your own personal copy, either print or ebook. Academic libraries seem to see that as some big failure. It's like, oh, we're not good enough, we're inadequate, we're forcing our users to buy something. They'll be too confused. These are college students. They're going to be too confused to see the difference between purchase link and, read online. So I think there's some real merit to that. Trying to find a way where the ebook package is both there for the searchability and the marketing, but it actually produces some sales to help make everybody happy.
Okay, well, thank you, October. Thank you, Rachel. This is obviously a discussion to be continued and sampled and experimented with. Interesting times as always. Thank you very much. It's break time.
Thanks.